Welcome back to Dear Aunt Susan Advice for Being Human. I'm your host, Aunt Susan Patang. For those of you who don't know what my show is about, I answer questions about frustration, stress, life, the universe, or anything else that you want to ask. So, in every episode, not only do I answer your questions, but I'll give you some takeaways that hopefully will help you when you're dealing with the BS of everyday life. There is no reason that we have to suffer. So, I do my best to help you not suffer. Let's see, we don't want life to suck, right? So, today, what I wanted to start with, I do have some questions I want to answer, but I've been asked a lot of questions recently about where to draw the line between taking care of our own needs and taking care of the needs of others. So I wanted to dedicate a chunk of this episode to addressing that because I've been getting a lot of questions about that recently, and that's a tough one. Ever since we were kids, at least when I was a kid, it was drummed into us that we have to be nice to other people. We have to show respect to our elders. You have to behave and you have to look out for the needs of others before you look out for your own needs, blah, 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 because that's the right thing to do, or you're doing what's nice. It's not nice not to think about others. And that becomes even harder when we're anxious or depressed or stressed out, because when those emotions are going on, we're trying to cover our back. We're going to be focused on self-protection. And it's kind of hard to be focused on other people's well-being when we're constantly watching our own back. The result of that is that not only do we start to doubt our own judgment, but we also start feeling bad about ourselves. Because after all, didn't our parents teach us that we should be looking out for others, even at our own expense? I know that a lot of very religious households tend to drift into territory like that. Not all of them. I know mine did, big time. It was always, you give them the shirt off your back and you let them walk all over you, and that's what that's what we're being taught to do. So, give you an example. I had a friend, and she stopped speaking to me because I wouldn't help her repaint her hallway. And the day she asked me at the last minute, and it was kind of, I was getting ready to go on vacation, and I couldn't. It was just impossible. And I offered to help her when I came home, but she got really upset, and she stormed off and said, that's it. And she never spoke to me again. And it really hurt my feelings because I couldn't understand why. I mean, it seemed like an extreme response. And yes, she was under pressure, and her anger really had nothing to do with me and my response. But it made me start evaluating the friendship. Had I been a taker over the course of that friendship? Was I being selfish and not giving back what I had taken out? And you know what I'm talking about. And I'm not talking just about romantic relationships or friendships, but also work relationships too. And we don't want to view ourselves as being selfish, especially after those messages that we got as kids. And then there's the reverse situation. What do you do when you have a friend who's a vampire, and the psychic vampire that sucks you dry and spits out the husk, and then they move on to somebody else and suck them dry too? So as long as you let them, they're going to keep sucking on your soul. So when do you know when it's time to set limits, or what is reasonable or not reasonable, and whether or not you're being selfish or it's an unreasonable demand on the part of somebody else? It's kind of hard sometimes to set those guidelines. I tried to create some guidelines that I could use when I was faced with these types of situations. And it's almost impossible because every situation is different. Even they all have different, all these relationships have different dynamics. But I did come up with some thoughts, and I'd like to share them with you, and maybe you'll find them helpful. And I'm calling these some guidelines for interacting with other people. This is part of the curriculum that I use when I'm coaching my clients and they have difficult relationships. The first is the Mr. Rogers School of Personal Interactions. And you remember Mr. Rogers. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood with the sneakers and the sweater and the whole nine yards. You watched that when you were a kid. And he was this awesome guy in real life who would focus in on the person he was talking to like they were the only person in the world. even if it was a small child, to him, he acted as though they were the only thing in his world at that moment. Can you imagine what it must be like to talk to somebody like that, where they are just focused in only on you and they're not looking at their watch or checking their phone or looking over your shoulder or, oh, look at that hot guy that just went by. Focusing right in on you. Wow, that has to be very gratifying. And think about that. So be like Mr. Rogers. Focus on other people when you're interacting with them. Don't be thinking about what you're going to say next and looking at your watch or your phone or whatever. Focus on them and listen to what they're saying. The second guideline is the golden rule. Okay, yeah, I know. We all know what that is. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. How would you like to be treated, though? Have you thought about that? If you were interacting with somebody else, think about that. How would you like to be treated in this situation? Do a mental role reversal. Sometimes that's all we need to make a decision about what the right thing to do is to put ourselves in somebody else's position and do what we would like to have done to us. And there is a corollary to the golden rule. This is the golden rule part 2. Treat other people the way they want to be treated. So imagine this. You're trying to be nice to a coworker and help them out with some stuff that they're behind on, and there's this report, and you're going to put your sticky fingers on it, but you don't know that this is their special baby, and they've been working on this for weeks. And if they say no, for God's sake, leave it alone, okay? If they don't want your help, back off, okay? The next guideline is to be the change you want to see. So instead of bitching and moaning about people or about things, set an example. What did other people do that you think is wrong? Well, make sure that you never do that. Be solution oriented instead of being bitchy. There's another saying, it's think globally and act locally. I know I'm pulling out all the cliches today, but they're so appropriate sometimes. So, for example, let's say climate change makes you crazy, and it really makes you nuts that all these big corporations are dumping chemicals into the water and that there's all this greenhouse gas that's going out. And what can you do about that as a person? Nothing. Okay. You can't control other people, you can't control the big corporations, but you can control what you do. Think globally. So, what's the thing to do that is going to be best for the situation as a whole? And what can I do as an individual to work towards that, even if you don't have control over the whole situation, right? So, what can you do in your own neck of the woods? Don't be a jerk. Don't bitch about it. Don't throw the candy bar out the window after you finish with it. Be the example. Be the change that you want to see. Be the person that you want other people, be the example, show other people how you want to be treated too. And that kind of leads us into the next guideline, which is to walk a mile in someone else's moccasins. Yes, another cliche. But what's going on with them? Okay, the other people that you're interacting with. They might have had a fight with their spouse. The dog might have peed on their shoes. If you don't know, ask. You can say things like, wow, you seem really angry today. Are you okay? Okay, just don't go, oh, wow, she's a bitchy one today. See what's going on. See if you can help. And that leads us also to examining your own motivations. Okay, and here's a really good way to see if you are doing the selfish thing or the selfless thing. Okay, what are you looking for? Are you looking for attention? Are you looking for approval? Help others because it feels good to help them, not because you want something in return. A good way to decide if your motivations are pure is to think about whether you would still do what you're thinking about doing if nobody was watching. Okay, so if nobody's watching, would you still help this person? If that person didn't know that you were going to do this for them, would you still do it? And if the answer is yes, I would still do it, good for you. Your motivation is pure. If it's, well, no, if nobody would, I wouldn't do it if nobody was watching, what's the point? Then you're just self-gratifying. That's selfish. Okay, so that's a really good way to determine whether or not what you're doing is selfish or not. Okay, or self-oriented as far as your motivations are concerned. You can do anything in life that you want to. You have the freedom, no matter what it is, everything. And I mean absolutely everything. But you also have to be willing to accept the consequences of your actions. So you don't want to do something that's going to hurt yourself, and you don't want to do something that's going to hurt other people because that's just morally wrong, isn't it? And you shouldn't be hurting yourself either. That's morally wrong. So that can be a guideline for whether or not what you're thinking of doing is selfish or selfless. Okay. Are you hurting somebody else? Are you hurting yourself? And are you willing to accept the consequences of your actions? Okay. So, yes, you could go out tomorrow and take a baseball bat and slam in the window of a business that you don't like, and you're going to get arrested and you're going to have to pay damages, and who knows what all else you'll get charged with. Are you willing to take those consequences? Then don't take the bat out. Okay. There you go. So, you want to be willing to accept those consequences of whatever you're going to do. Think it through. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Another thing that you can do is to look for the opportunity to be of service to others. Look for where you can be of help. How can I be of help here? If that is your mode of thought while you're out with other people, among other people, hold doors open, pick things up that other people drop, offer help, and respect the no if that's what you get, because we talked about that before. If your help isn't wanted, just back off and don't be creepy. Um, but if doing something for someone else is going to hurt you, then don't do it. What did we just say? You can do anything you want as long as you don't hurt yourself or hurt somebody else, and as long as you're willing to accept the consequences. And don't apologize for not doing something if it's going to hurt you. If it's only an inconvenience, then that's where you start getting in those sticky areas, and you have to make the tough decisions about whether or not it's something that you want to do and weigh the benefit versus the disadvantage. Okay. So a coworker might need a ride home. They might not have a car. Say you got a coworker, doesn't have a car, needs a ride home all the time. Okay. They take the bus. And you like to drive them home because they're a really nice person and you know how hard they work and they're a good team member and you count them as a friend. So, should you be driving them home all the time? Well, it depends. What do you have to do after work? Are there other obligations that you have that you don't have time now to drive them home every day? How about gas? Okay, so if you're on a tight budget and you don't really have a lot of gas money, you might want to drive them home, but it would be if you don't have enough gas to get to work by the end of the week, that's hurting you, isn't it? So, how do you make that decision? Well, there are a couple of ways that you can do that. If it's out of the way and you don't have enough gas for the week, you could either say no, or you could ask them to reimburse you for gas. Or you might suggest to that person, "Hey, I'd love to help you, but I don't have any gas. Maybe Joe over there can take you home today." Okay? If the guy has cooties, now you may want to say no, no matter how nice they are, because you don't want to have to disinfect the inside of your car and risk getting cooties yourself, right? So that's a whole other situation. You see how situations can be really, really different. So only you can decide how you feel about doing things for others in situations like that. Okay. Now, there are going to be times when others are going to ask too much of you, and you're going to need to set a limit. And that is where you pull out what's called the XYZ formula. When you do X, I feel Y, and I'd like Z. So you might say to the guy who wants a ride home all the time, when you ask me for rides home every day, it eats up my gas, and I get stressed out because I'm afraid I won't have enough. So if I do drive you home, I'd like you to pay for some gas. Or you could say, when you ask me for a ride home every day, I get a little irritated. I don't mind taking you once in a while, but maybe you could ask somebody else for a change because I do have other things to do. See, it's tone. Now, that is really super important to remember because you could also make those same statements super bitchy. Okay. And that, unless you absolutely have to, try not to because that's just not nice. So I hope those guidelines were helpful in helping you try to get some clarification on when to draw the line, what is selfish and what is not selfish. If you have questions, I'm just going to drop this in here before we go on to the next question. You can email me at Susan A.T. the quiet zone at gmail.com. So if any of these concepts are difficult or you're having trouble implementing them, no worries. Send me an email and ask for clarification. I'll be happy to answer your questions. Okay, so reader questions or listener questions, I should say. This one I don't have a name for, I'm sorry. To whomever sent this, I want you to know that I got to you. How can I handle my constant need to be perfect? It eats me up inside. I know it's all in my head, but it still bothers me. Wow, perfectionism, that's tough, okay? You can start by asking yourself every time you feel the need to do something perfectly. Ask yourself, how perfectly does this have to be done? If I do this to 80% perfection, is it going to be okay? How about 60%? How about 40%? And then let the result match your need. Okay. So, for example, you don't have to vacuum the pattern off the rug to get it clean. How clean is clean enough? Does it need to be vacuumed to 80% because you're having company? Or is it just your maintenance vacuuming that you could do a 40% and move on to something else? Okay. Evaluate how much perfection needs to be put into each task. Then ask yourself, how important is this task anyway? Okay. Am I going to remember this in 5 years, in 5 months, in 5 minutes? Is it going to change the weather on Jupiter if I don't vacuum the rug absolutely perfectly so that every single bit of crud is off? Probably not. It's not going to matter. So give it that 40% or 60% job and worry about it next week. A lot of times we strive for perfection because we're also looking for control. That's a lot of times that's the real reason for perfectionism. And it's ironic, but the more we try to control things, the less likely we are to get control. The amount of control that we seek is an indicator of how out of control we feel about one or more aspect of our life. Okay. So a really good exercise is to dig into the why. Why do you feel like you need to have perfection in this situation? Why do you think the rug needs to be vacuumed to the point where you're taking the pattern off? Why do you need to have control? Okay, what is it that you feel out of control in? Why is it so important for things to be a certain way? What experiences that you've had in your life prior to now have caused you to think like this? Because a lot of times there are cognitive distortions that are going on. Cognitive distortions are simply when your subconscious is telling you something is true when it's not. Like, if I can't make it perfect, it's not worth doing. Well, that's not true, okay? Yeah, you want to do your best, but you don't have to do it perfectly. Okay. That's a cognitive distortion. So you might want to look into the whys. Okay. And in your answers, you can ask yourself, is this logical? Is this reasonable? Is this true? So if you feel like your work life is out of control and you have no control over the tasks that you're doing and your boss is a micromanager, you may come home and try to vacuum the pattern off the rug. Okay, so you see where I'm going with this. How reasonable is that need for control? How logical is it? How true is it? And how can I correct the problem? Always be solution oriented. How can I correct the problem? Okay, so what do you think is going to happen? Here's another tactic for dealing with perfectionism. What do you think is going to happen if you don't do a task or you don't behave in a certain way perfectly according to your definition? How reasonable is your expectation? Okay, so why do you feel like you need to do this perfectly? What is going to happen if you don't? Okay, so if you don't do an absolutely perfect job of cleaning the house, what's going to happen? Do you think everybody in the house is going to die from horrible disease? Of course not. Will the cleaning police show up and critique your work? Of course not. Okay. And a really good tactic to overcome perfectionist tendencies is to ask yourself, so what? All right. When you start thinking about the horrible catastrophes that will come your way if you aren't perfect or something, ask yourself, so what? So what if the cleaning police come and take you away because you didn't do a perfect job at the vacuuming? Okay. So what if the dishes in the sink didn't all get washed tonight? Wash them tomorrow. Why does it have to be done right now? Okay. Think about the logic and the reason in your environment and what you're doing. Okay. Oh, here's a good one. Nicole sent me a question, and she asks that she says that the fact that I'm feeling miserable right now, I'm overweight, and I'm not far along in life means that I'm not thinking right. How can I change this situation? Well, first of all, big round of applause to Nicole for being solution oriented. What was I just saying? Okay. Be solution oriented. The fact that she's aware her thinking isn't right is the first step. Good job, pat on the back, and a huge round of applause. The second step, of course, is to make the decision to do something about it. So another big round of applause to Nicole. Okay, so here are some things that she can do. Okay, these are the foundation strategies that I give to my clients. The key life skills that are going to help them learn how to wake up happy in the morning. And I'm going to give them here to you for free. Number one, be mindful. What happened in the past is over. It's done. We can't do anything about it. The future isn't here yet. Focus on what you're doing right now. Yes, she's going to want to set some goals, but what she has to do is focus on the task that she's doing at the moment that's working toward that goal. And we're going to talk about creating goals for her in a minute. The second step is to be grateful. Find small, everyday things that are wonderful and positive and amazing to be grateful for. And I've been talking about this for the last 3 episodes. You know that. Did you make it through the green traffic light? Hooray! Was there a short line in the supermarket? Bonus! Did you get your chores done in record time? Woohoo! Now you have time to do something fun. Stop taking for granted all the little wonderful things that you see in nature or the technology that you use every day. These are miracles. Find the smallest things to be grateful for, because the more you notice, the more you're going to see. The new car factor. Third step, bolster your self-esteem. Find the small wins or create them for yourself, so you can pat yourself on the back and give yourself a round of applause. So, for example, when you stick to your diet, pat yourself on the back, give yourself a huge round of applause, and say, see, I can do this. You're giving yourself a positive affirmation that's actually based on a real event. That's important. Affirmations do not work unless they are based on real events. So create your affirmations around real stuff that you did. So for example, let's just say in the last thing we were talking about, being selfish, and am I selfish? Am I not selfish? Should I do this for somebody else or shouldn't I? Okay, let's say that you think I'm a selfish person. Okay, but then you help somebody put their bags into a car, or you hold the door open for a stranger, or you do something nice or smile at somebody. Okay, now you can create an affirmation that says, I am a kind person. I'm not selfish. Look at these things that I just did. Because if your affirmation isn't based on a real event, your subconscious is going to sabotage you. It's going to go to war with your conscious mind and make sure that you can't accomplish what you're trying to do. So, bolster your self-esteem by giving yourself positive affirmations that are built on real events. Last thing, we said we were going to talk about goals. Create goals for yourself and then break them down into bite-sized pieces. So let's just say that Nicole, this is Nicole, right? Yeah, Nicole's goal. Let's say that she wants to go back to college and get a degree in nursing because she's decided that that's what she wants to do. Okay. It's going to seem like a monumental and overwhelming thing. Oh my gosh, 4 years of college, and then I'm going to have to continue my education if I want to get my RN, blah, 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 blah. It seems huge, doesn't it? But if you break it down into steps, like, okay, I need to get together all the paperwork for applying for the student loan. Now I have to apply for the student loan. Now I have to call the school and enroll, okay? Or however, whatever order that goes in. So you've broken that big honking goal of getting a degree in nursing into, oh, I just need to get together my paperwork. Oh, I just need to make a phone call. Oh, I just need to fill in this. Okay. That takes it down to much less overwhelming steps. So they're all steps towards getting toward that goal of getting a degree, but they don't seem so horrible. So schedule those smaller tasks into your calendar. And a lot of times what I do with my clients is I tell them, find an end date. Okay, we're going to talk about smart goal setting in another episode, but get an end date picked. So I want to have my degree in nursing by this time. Okay, so you can say, all right, well, if that's when I want to finish, that means I have to start here, which means I have to start getting my paperwork together here and be enrolled by this date, and put them all in your calendar. Okay, and I know people like to have their online calendars and their Google calendars and all whatever. I really do like to keep a paper handwritten calendar. And not only because technology does fail and goes haywire, and I can attest to that, boy, I can testify, but also because the act of writing reinforces information, and it's really emotionally pleasing to cross tasks off your list. It gives you an emotional boost. So until next time, I hope you have enjoyed this episode of Dear Aunt Susan, Advice on Being Human. This show is sponsored by the Quiet Zone Coaching. That's me. And like I told you before, I teach life skills to all of you that your parents never taught you, so that you can manage stress, avoid frustration, and delete drama, okay? We want to teach you how to wake up happy in the morning. So please send your questions to Susan A.T., the Quiet Zone Coach. Oh, the Quiet Zone, Susan A.T., the Quiet Zone at gmail.com. And my website is www.thequietzonecoaching.com. Until next week, I'll talk to you then. Bye.